So the Summer Olympics are in full display now. And when it started, there was quite a controversy that involved a part of the ceremony where it appeared that a woman was depicting herself as Jesus, drag queens as her disciples, and it appeared to be a mockery of the Lord's Supper, specifically a picture or a painting that was made by Leonardo da Vinci. And so a lot of people said, you know what, that is an insult. I'm angry. I'm not going to watch anything when it comes to the Olympics. I'm shutting her down. Organizers say, hey, that wasn't our intention. We weren't trying to offend anybody. We just wanted everybody to feel welcome and included. So who's telling the truth? Are we over-exaggerating as Christians? Are the organizers actually telling us the truth? And how are we supposed to respond to this whole thing? Well, that's what I want to talk about today on the next edition of the Midweek Snack. Okay, everybody. Now, here's the picture that I'm talking about. Here's a picture where it appears just from the surface that this lady has a crown on her head, kind of a halo crown, something that you would see like in a medieval painting, a Renaissance painting. And it appears that she has a bunch of people, they're actually drag queens, people who seem to be representing the disciples. And the organizers will look at this and they'll tell people that that was not our intention. We weren't trying to basically project a different interpretation of Jesus or his disciples. And that isn't even an actual table. Well, is this true? Well, I want to give credit where credit is due. First of all, that is not a table, believe it or not. That is actually, we're going to find this out, it's going to be a runway. And if you look behind the lady and all the people, what you see is the Seine River there. This is taking place in Paris, and it's outside, and it's on a bridge. And so what happens next really verifies the point, because this turns into a fashion show. The red carpet is simply a catwalk for the models to display all the latest fashions. And if you know anything about Paris, you know that they are a place that's known for high fashion. So from the surface, it looked like these people were mocking Jesus, but when we look at the actual show, basically celebrating this lady as she and other models walk through the walkway. And another thing the organizers wanted you to notice is there's no food on this. It's not a table. There's no food. The only thing that's on this is some kind of a mixer where the woman she's going to be mixing and raising her hands as the models walk on by. So, man, it looks like the organizers were right. This isn't meant to be a mockery of Jesus or anything like that. It's simply supposed to project Paris. But there was a problem. You see, though this wasn't technically a table, and though there technically wasn't any food on it, that would change. Dionysus is this god of wine. He was the god that whenever you had a party, whenever you had people that wanted to have fun, to experiment, to do things that are licentious, Dionysius was the one that you would call. So that is odd, because now things start to change. This isn't a catwalk. The catwalks seem to be just something that kind of gets your mind distracted from what's really going on, because behind this Smurf, behind Dionysius, is the lady who seems to be representing Jesus. And so she is literally in the center of this. It's almost as if she is part of the platter. And I want you to know that people that doing this for choreography's sake, everything has to be perfectly coordinated. It was always the intention to convey that this woman figure here is part of what is being dished out. And what is being dished out here? This idea that, hey, Jesus is welcome to the table. Everybody's welcome to the table. Even deities are invited to the table. Even people from all persuasions, from all walks of life are invited to the Last Supper and to be a part of it, because the kingdom of heaven is essentially going to be a place where everybody lives, even some of these gods like Dionysius. So the image that's being projected and the image that they kept communicating over and over again is that this opening ceremony and this scene was meant to promote inclusiveness. It was meant to take away from all the violence and the hatred that's going on, and it's meant to show this inclusive nature where everybody is welcome to be a part of the Last Supper. What do you think about that? This is the thing that has caused a lot of people to be really upset, because they're like, you're mocking Jesus. Now, what's interesting is that this god Dionysius, he goes by another name called Bacchus. And the reason is because Dionysius was Greek. And what I'm assuming was happening was that the French were trying to make this connection to the beginning of the Olympics, which was birthed in Greece. So Dionysius, this partying attitude, he was also known as Bacchus when the Romans came into power. They liked this god and they said, we want to name him Bacchus. And so Bacchus has all these parties and these festivals that they're called bacchanals. These bacchanals basically reflect this licentious lifestyle, this drinking of wine, this revelry. You have people here that are angels, people here that are different kinds of gods. If you look at the arrow that's pointing at this man, that is Bacchus, that is Dionysius. And you can tell by the little halo that kind of goes over his head, indicating that this person is somehow holy. He is the son of Zeus. And again, the image is everybody is getting along. Everybody's having a good time. There's no more war. And this is the message that the organizers say they were trying to promote: inclusiveness. They wanted everybody to feel welcome, everyone to be part of the party. But what about this lady? Because she seems to be presenting herself as Jesus. Well, according to some of the research that I've done, there's an explanation for this lady. And I want you to notice that she has 7 spikes on her head. So these 7 spikes are supposed to give us a little bit of information about her identity. Her name, Lady Liberty. Now, for those of you who are wondering where Lady Liberty comes from those of you who may have a possible guess, I think you're right. Because Lady Liberty is none other than that statue that we see in New York City on the harbor. This is Lady Liberty. And we all know her as the Statue of Liberty. And by the way, the French in around 1893, they were the ones that brought this statue to America, and is a gift that was given to us because of this desire of us to have freedom and liberty and justice in our country. So they would say that woman is not Jesus, that is not a crown on her head, that woman reflects Lady Liberty, not somebody who's meant to be holy. But in order to really understand this, you got to look at the Lord's Supper. So this is known as the Last Supper. This is a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. And before I get started, I just want to make a couple points I think it's important to mention. First of all, this painting was made in 1495. Okay, so to get an idea of how late that is after Jesus, it's over 1450 years. So this is not a depiction of what Jesus would have looked like in the first century. It's not a depiction of what his disciples would have looked like. It's not even a depiction of how they would have ate this meal. During the time of Jesus, there were no tables like this. There were no chairs that people were sitting on. Instead, what you would see are people that would just be sitting on the floor or on a pad and kneeling around a table that is filled with all kinds of food. This is what the Last Supper actually would have looked like. And another thing that I want to notice as we look at this painting again is the color of the skin. They are obviously here white. Jesus wasn't white. Jesus was a first century Jew. Jesus was somebody that was raised in the Middle East, and him and his disciples would have reflected that reality. So just before we start, just because I don't want anyone to basically look at this painting and say, this is not what Jesus looked like, and this is not what was depicted by the apostles. Jesus sat down and reclined around the table, and his disciples were from the Middle East and most likely had olive-toned skin. Okay, so I think it's just important to say that because, this painting that we see with Da Vinci, it's iconic. Everybody sees this painting. Many people have walked into the homes of others and they've seen this painting of Jesus, and they conclude that this is what Jesus and his disciples actually look like. This is what the Lord's Supper actually looked like. And it's incorrect. So in order for us to really understand what kind of messaging is being communicated, we have to compare the pictures. So clearly, this is a reference to the Lord's Supper. Clearly it is. You have the lady who's in the center of the picture. She has like a kind of a halo kind of thing on her head. And Jesus, you can't really see it here, but in most medieval paintings, Jesus would have that little glowy halo thing. Secondly, notice that they wore dresses back then. And the people that were in this particular play, the drag queens, they were dressed up as female, okay? So there's this idea, again, of messaging that's being communicated. You notice the coloring, too, the coloring. Though the colors may not exactly match, they are very much in contrast of other people at the table in both pictures here. So you see that this is clearly a messaging here of this is what it should have looked like. Notice the guy that's to the left all the way of this lady, his head is turned into the other direction there. And if you look at some of the disciples on the left of Jesus, their heads are also turned in another direction. Notice hands. Hands, especially on the right side of Jesus, are on the table. You see a lot of people's hands that are on the table, supposedly runway here. And then finally, if you count all the people that are on the stage with this woman, they actually match the number 12, which is exactly how many Jesus had. So there's Jesus and his 12 disciples, and there's this lady and her 12 drag queens. And so again, messaging is happening here. And the amazing thing about this is it's so well choreographed that you weren't really supposed to see this. It was supposed to be something that happened very quickly. But the reality is that everybody noticed this when they slowed it down. I mean, this whole scene probably lasted about a minute or two, maybe 3 minutes, and it just kept moving on. But what was happening here was everything was choreographed. So they got exactly what they were looking for. And so for any person that was involved in the creation of this event, this specific scene, for them to say it wasn't their intention is being dishonest, because it's quite clear here. You have someone that's given you their version of what the Lord's Supper should look like today in our culture. And it should be inclusive. It shouldn't be about bread and wine. It should be about partying, getting together, whether you're gay or you're straight, whether you're trans or you can't identify your gender. This is what is being communicated. But you know what? Jesus had a much different message. A much different message during that Last Supper meal. On this table, Jesus was basically trying to comfort his disciples. He's not mixing music. He's trying to comfort them because he knows that this is his very last night. And as he explains that he has to leave and where he's going, one of his disciples says, Jesus, just show us the way. And Jesus responds like this, I am the way and the truth and the life. And all those three things are very important as we contrast what's going on here. First of all, the organizers were saying we were just trying to present this idea of inclusiveness, where everybody's getting together. There's no more hatred. There's no more warring or fighting with each other. Jesus is messaging here that, hey, there is a such thing as a way to God, and that way is through me. Now, anybody is invited to the table, but the reality is that Jesus is the way. He is exclusive in that particular setting, but he's inclusive to saying all are invited to partake. It's up to the individuals to say and to concur that Jesus is the way. The second thing that's being communicated in this passage here is that Jesus is the truth. And we live in a culture today that's being messaged here again in this modern day version of the Lord's Supper, that truth is relative. That truth is what you want it to be. That if somebody worships a different god like Dionysius, then it's okay to have them join the party with Jesus. And if somebody identifies differently than other people, it's okay. No matter what you believe, it's okay. You can believe in your God. We believe in our God. You can believe in your truth. We believe in our truth. So Jesus says, I am the way and I am the truth. In other words, the teachings that Jesus shared for people to follow are the truth. And the last component of this is that Jesus is saying, I am the life. So he said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And what that means really is that just because you might believe that Jesus died for your sins, or you might be open to that reality, doesn't necessarily mean you have saving faith in him. Remember when James the apostle said that faith without works is dead? Your faith should always reflect a changed life. I think about myself. My life was changed. I had to go away from what Kenny thinks and Kenny wants and Kenny desires to what Jesus wants. And I had to learn that change. And so Jesus is saying that the way you live should reflect who you are in Christ. Jesus is saying the way that we live is indicative of our saving faith. So the messaging is completely different. It's very serious, but there's nothing that's more serious than understanding if Jesus is going to go away, everybody wants to know, what must I do in my part? And that was the message that was being communicated. So it's obvious, okay? It's obvious that there was messaging that was going on here. It's obvious that this messaging was trying to confuse you, was trying to basically take something that's sacred to Christians and really defile it in a sense that says it's inclusive and everybody's welcome to the party. So with that said, how are we as Christians supposed to respond? Should we turn off the Olympics and say, you know what, that was disgusting, that made me angry, and I don't want to watch you at all, have anything to do with the Olympics? Some people have drawn that line. When I think about this, I think about Jesus, and I go, what would Jesus have done? Because Jesus himself was mocked many times, especially when he was on his deathbed, when he was being crucified, when he was being primed to get killed. Remember, he had a thorn of crowns that was smashed on his head. Somebody threw a sign around his neck that said, King of the Jews. They didn't believe Jesus was a king, but he did, and so they were mocking him. And they were spitting at him. They were yelling, crucify him on the cross. And Jesus didn't say, okay, that's it. I'm going to call down my angels and I'm going to take care of you. He could have, easily. He could have been mad, could have been upset. But he knew his purpose. And his purpose was to die, not only for people that would come to believe in him, but even people that seemed so far away that there's no chance that they could believe in Jesus. Jesus said to the Father, for everybody that was acting wicked, for everybody that was licentious, for everybody that was basically worshiping other gods, he said, Lord, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And so that's the heart of Jesus. The heart of Jesus is to be a light in a dark place. Was this Olympics demonic? Yeah, of course it was. Was the messaging of God? No, it was the messaging of man powered by demonic undertones. But that never stopped Jesus. Jesus never stopped rebuking demons. Jesus never stopped casting out demons. Jesus never allowed the forces of darkness to stop his ministry. And so what I'm trying to say is, I think Jesus would have watched the Olympics. I think Jesus would have invited people to watch it with him. I think he would have used an event like this to contrast the messaging that's being going on in the culture and the truth that he actually was trying to portray that day in the first century. You know, Jesus loved everybody. It doesn't matter if you're LGBTQ and you can add letters and pluses to that. It doesn't matter if you believe in a different religion. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist. The reality is that Jesus died for everybody. But in saying that, he says, there are three things that you need to know. I am the way and the truth and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. And my prayer is that during these Olympics, during our times at work, let's use this platform, let's use this event that's caused such an outrage and use it to build bridges and to share why and what was being communicated. Because in the end, God provides all these opportunities for us, and he can use something that many consider evil for the good, just as he did with Joseph, for the sake of saving lives. Let's think like Jesus, and let's do everything in our power to win people to Christ, even if it's just a small amount of people. Jesus is worth it. And you're worth it. And that's all I got for today. So until the next time we meet again, God bless everybody, and I hope you have a great week.